3800 Daily. Today we are going to take the intercooler off of the lower intake manifold, and hopefully we're going to be able to access the lower intake manifold gaskets and see what they look like in this video. Fingers crossed, that's the plan. So first things first, we've already got the supercharger off, set to the side. We're gonna take the gaskets off, we're gonna inspect them, see where our failures were, so that way we can prevent that for next time. So without further ado, let's get into part two. Okay, so seeing that the intercooler stuck on there, I'm gonna make a little bit of room around it. So we're gonna go ahead and take off the necessity things that need to be taken off anyways, like our fuel rails. Now when you come to take off your fuel rails, make sure you're at somewhere ventilated, because fuel is going to come out. You can reduce the amount of fuel that does come out by pulling the fuse to your fuel pump and cranking the car, doing a little starter fluid, cranking the car, getting all that fuel out of those lines. However, it's not going to get it all out. That's just going to relieve the pressure. So, of course, like in my last videos, that bolt and that bolt, they're going to be a lot easier to get to, since you can actually see. And then on top of that, we've also got to remove our thermostat housing. Now keep in mind that there is coolant in here and it is going to come out. So make sure you are somewhere where it can drain properly, dispose of your coolant properly via environmental hazards. Also, if you want to take these off, you can bend them, pinch them, whatever. And I think that's about everything that we can get off up to this point. I'm going to look for other ways to get this intercooler off. One of my ideas was just a simple crowbar and a hammer, but you got to be careful because this is, of course, it's aluminum block, and I can't imagine it's a solid aluminum block given the screws here. By the way, those screws hold this all together, so you don't want to take those out. So let's get to taking the fuel rails off. I'm gonna keep a rag handy. So of course, first thing of taking the fuel rails off is you want to disconnect your injectors. Pop up your green locking tabs on all of your injector plugs, and then squeeze the gray square and pull. Make sure you number or tape them or whatever, keep track of where these go, because if you put them on the wrong injectors, you're in for a bunch of misfires, possible damage of your rods, blah 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 blah. You can disconnect this as well to get this out of the way. Make sure you document everything that you do disconnect, because it's going to look like a rat's nest by the time you're done. Alright, so this is another day. I had to stop doing this. I got really pissed off at it. Couldn't get my intercooler off, and I finally got it loose. It took going to Harbor Freight and getting one of these little chisels and sticking it in the corner here and just wailing on it with a hammer, and then eventually, boop. So in order to get the remainder of your gasket and RTV off, get you one of these things from Harbor Freight. It's $1.99 and it comes with this razor scraper, which is hopefully going to be very useful while getting all that extra crap off. So let's go ahead and pull this off and see what it looks like. Not as bad as I thought it was going to be, but that's okay. So we're going to, I'm going to go ahead and just disconnect this completely. I'm going to have to put more coolant in it anyways, and drain it. Maybe take one side off, put it in a bucket. We'll figure this out. But we'll scrape all this clean, and then when it comes to the lower intake manifold, take all the bolts out. There's one there, two there, one there. There's also two here, and it's identical on the adjacent side. Those would be 10 millimeter, by the way. All right, so after you get all your bolts out, get your, it's not like perfectly clean, but you know, it's good enough. Make sure when you take your intake manifold off, make sure you keep mind of your vacuum line and your coolant elbow right here. So when you go to pull it off, just kind of figure out which side of that elbow wants to let go first. I kind of want this side to let go, but I feel like it's gonna be this side. All right, so we got the lower intake manifold taken off. It seemed like the elbow let go on this side. So here's what we're working with. That looks a little rough. Little torn there. Looking at, these are our coolant passageways right here. These are our intakes. And this, of course, is our gasket. Comes right off. Alright, off the bat, I'm not really seeing anything that could cause for leaking. At least not on this one. I feel like it's the other one. This one. I don't see something. I don't see anything right off the bat on this one either. It has to be the other one of these. The one that's ripped. This one right here. That one has to be the issue. Because that shouldn't look like that. Well, time to clean it up a little bit. Throw the new gaskets on there. From what I'm told is to put some RTV here, 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 and here. And then for good measure, I'm gonna put it in each top corner as well. And yeah, so I'm gonna clean this up real quick. So I wanna make note of this, looking at the underside of our lower intake manifold. Right here, we have some pitting. This is due to the corrosive nature of certain coolants, specifically the orange one, when it's not properly changed when it's supposed to be. And when everybody says change out your coolant from orange to green, this is why. Now if you maintain the orange coolant like you're supposed to, you shouldn't have this problem. But it's a lot easier to switch to green and just not have this problem. So here's your little pointer there. All right, so now while we're in here, I got all this cleaned up as best I could. Put the razor blade on it, scraped off all of the corrosion and buildup around the coolant passages there and the intake holes there. As promised, we're gonna replace our valve covers. You probably guessed it. When you're pulling these bolts out, please keep in mind that there are gaskets that come with them. Don't damage them. Be careful because they break easy. So you're gonna need those out of this valve cover here. So when you pull them out, make sure that gasket comes with them. Put them somewhere safe. And I'm gonna try and do this without having to take off the engine mount bracket there. I might have a harder time going around the alternator. Really trying not to take that belt off. But we're going to see exactly if we can execute this properly. I forgot a bolt down there. All right, got that bolt out. Really hoping that we can get this valve cover out without having to. It doesn't seem like it. Okay, this sucks. I'm gonna finesse a little bit off camera. If not, screw it. All right, yeah, there's no getting around it. Alternator's gonna have to come off. Engine mount bracket's gonna have to come off. The rockers are just too high up. Of course, just release tension off of this belt. The tensioner is right down here. Tensioner is right here. Do the same thing you did with this tensioner over here, and then remove the alternator. You should have a bolt up here. And then once the alternator comes off, you should be able to get your rear valve cover off. However, the front valve cover is gonna have to come off after this bracket comes off. So you don't have to remove your coils, you just unplug your spark plugs. It's gonna have to happen anyways. And then you're gonna have a bolt that goes through the tensioner right here. All right, once you get that tensioner pulley off, you're gonna have another bolt. It's a 13, by the way. You're gonna have another bolt down here on this peg. Once you get that one off, you have to take this pulley off to get it off. You could slip a ratchet on there or a wrench on there and get that one off pretty easily. especially if you've got an adjustable head. Alright, so it turns out that that pulley and this other stud down here is actually a 15. So now that we got both of those off, we're going to take this engine mount bracket off. It's going to be easier just to take it off here. However, make sure you put a jack underneath the engine to hold this up, because you don't want to screw anything up. So I'm going to get a jack under the car, hold the engine up temporarily. We're going to slide this off. Alright, let's get this thing off. Alright, and then after that, the valve cover should come off. Alright. We're going to need that gasket since it's still good, so make sure you pull this gasket out. And remember its orientation. We're going to clean this up, reuse it, and put it in our new valve covers. By the way, these are the 1.9 rockers and the 90-pound springs and the LS style retainers. In case you want to see what they look like, this is roughly a year after installation. They look pretty good to me. All the passages are still open. Also, those are the push rods from Easy Performance. Those are actually doing quite well themselves. So, enough being sidetracked. Alright, so on the alternator sides of things, you get that bolt undone right here. If you have this support bar, take that one off as well. So if you loosen your belt and take this off, leave this bolt on, you should just be able to rock your alternator back. That'll also loosen your belt. It helps a lot. So on this bracket, you're gonna have to take this bolt off and this bolt off. Oh, and there is a bolt on the back side down in here. So don't forget that one. There are all 15s. Alright, so I ended up just pulling it off. No coolant came out, fortunately enough. So now, this valve cover comes off. Oh, there it is. Good thing about having these composite valve covers and switching over to these aluminum ones is that these disperse heat better. They stay cooler. So ultimately, in the end, rather it's just a degree or two, your oil will be a little cooler. So, and they look good. Alright, so we got this rear valve cover on, and so far, I'm excited about the new look. Before you get too deep into putting it back together, make sure you clean this off, because, you know, any fingerprint, any, you know, bit of oil, grime, or whatever that's on it when it heats up for the first time may stain it. So make sure you clean it off really well. Alright, we got our other valve cover on. They look pretty sick. Alright, now let's put this sucker back together. I'm going to start with putting this bracket back on. Alright, so now that we've got our mounts and brackets and pulleys back on, we're going to next go ahead and put a dab of RTV right here, there, and there. And that's going to ensure that our gaskets on these sides of our intake manifold aren't going to leak later in the future. Alright, so when it comes to installing these gaskets on the side, make sure that these little nipples go inside of their corresponding holes here, and that this and this get tucked up under, just like that, and that goes under, just like that, and make sure the nipples go in the holes. And now that RTV is going to make a seal right there, and right there on those corners. I've had so many people tell me to do that, so we're going to give it a go and see if maybe this helps the longevity of my intake gaskets. Alright, now when it comes to reinstalling your manifold gaskets here, keep an eye on these nipples here as well. Now those are going to go in that hole and that hole. So make sure that they are flipped down. You have your coolant passages on the bottom, and it should just slap right on. Just like that. And then same thing on this side. I also put a little bit there where both the gaskets meet, just in case. Alright, it's time to put our lower intake manifold back on. Do not forget about your coolant elbow here. I'm going to attempt to slide it on and then down. All right, after you're placing your lower intake manifold back on, make sure your gaskets are sitting properly before you bolt this down. A lot of times you could accidentally knock one of them off. One of the orange ones can get folded. That would suck. So when you go to bolt these back on, don't just all the way around. Go corner to 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 corner. So do the lower bolts in here first, and then do the top bolts last on those end corners there. So just like you would a tire. So I totally forgot to record the underside of this gasket before I put it on. So sorry, got distracted. But basically outline all your inlets, outlets, passages with RTV. Make, it's a gasket. Just make sure you don't get any leaks. Make sure you don't have any sharp corners. So any corners, make sure you go round, not 90 degrees, go round, because that corner is gonna make as a weak spot. So round edges, top and bottom of this gasket. Slap your intercooler on top of that, and then do the same thing on this one, on the intercooler surface. RTV, 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 and then slap your other gasket on top. Your gasket that goes on top of your intercooler, do not put any RTV on the top side of that gasket. A little sloppy, but there you go. We're gonna put our other gasket on top of there. Then we're gonna ready to remount our supercharger. Belt on. That means we're getting close. So before I slap the supercharger on, I've decided I'm gonna go ahead and put my injectors and fuel rail back in. The best way to do this is to put a little bit of oil around the tip of each injector. Just like in my last video, I'll put a little thing right here for it. And that's going to be in how to install your injectors. It's going to give you some good tips on how to put those back in. So I'm going to put the injectors and the rails back on, bolt those on since they're a lot easier to get to in this manner, and then throw the supercharger on. All right, got the injectors on, everything's plugged in. Don't forget to push down your green locking latches. Supercharger time. All right, we got a supercharger planted on there. Again, I'm gonna put the tightening sequence right here. 17 foot-pounds all the way around for every single bolt. Let's get to tightening them. All right, and after you put your belt back on, get all your spark plugs put up, plugged in, all your wires situated. So I'm gonna go over everything that needs to be reconnected up to this point for functionality. So we're gonna start with your throttle body. Don't forget this connector that goes to your coolant temperature sensor. This connector, your injector connectors. This connector. This hose, this hose. This hose, don't mind the smoke. I already test fired it and it's burning off coolant. This connector right here, if you have an EGR, don't forget your EGR connector. I do not have one, I have an EGR Delete. So, your injector connectors on the back, about that connector, and your power from your alternator. If you disconnected your mass airflow sensor, don't forget that. If you disconnected your ground from your coil packs, don't forget that. I mix shift the ground. It has to be bolted to your heads. Don't forget to put your coil packs back on. Don't forget your supercharger vacuum line. And as far as that's concerned, I believe that is it. So let's fire it up. Oh, your battery too. Let's fire it up. And if you crank it and you notice some smoke coming out of your engine bay, just don't take smoke lightly, but always just double check and make sure it's nothing critical. More than likely, you spilled coolant on your exhaust, but let's give her a go. Hell yeah, brother. Don't rev it right after you put it back together. I had it run for a second
before I took this video.
So that's gonna about wrap it up here. Don't forget to subscribe. Don't forget to like this video, share it. If you have any questions, leave them in the comment section below. This took me about 2 days, and that's bouncing between chores and work and waiting on parts and stuff like that. So be patient with it. Don't forget anything. Take your time. For the love of God, take your time. That is so important, because if you don't, you make shortcuts, you do things wrong, you put things on backwards, you put pulleys upside down. A lot of bad shit can go just bad. Until next time, I don't know what I'm doing next. Probably a radiator flush. Actually, probably gonna take this radiator out and put in an oversized radiator. I know I've probably said that in the past, but this one's full of sludge and gunk. So, for the meantime, I'll probably flush it. If y'all want to see a video on flushing the radiator, let me know in the comments here. I don't want to, but I'll do it. Again, any comments, questions, leave them in the comments. Until next time, drive easy.